She said, "This is serious. We are praying for you." And after she prayed, Prince said amen.
Wow. It's a miracle. Well, absolutely. She's the longest free fall without a parachute.
My life flashed before my eyes.
All I knew was I had multiple organ failure and my body was shutting down. And this one particular doctor stayed with me and he had to restart my heart 3 times in the middle of the night.
She actually did pass away very briefly and they brought her back.
We look at each other. I just said, thank you.
Chapter 1, Girl Who Fell from the Sky by Stanley M. Brooks.
And that's the true story of Julianne Kepke, who in 1972 was living in Peru, going to the American school. She was 18, was in her senior year. Her parents were noted zoologists. She had lived part of her childhood in the Amazon. Her parents were cataloging butterflies and bats. And then when she got to middle school, they moved her to Lima, and she grew up there, spoke perfect German, perfect English, perfect Spanish. And because it was, they're on a different schedule than us, because their seasons are different than us, their school year ends in December. So she was both graduating and going to her prom in December, and her dad wanted them to go to the Amazon on Christmas Eve, and she wanted to stay. And so he went early, and she and her mom stayed behind in Lima, and she went to her prom, graduated with her friends, and then they got on a plane. And when the plane was over the Amazon, it was hit by lightning twice and disintegrated in midair, and she was in the window seat, still strapped in. And as she said, I didn't leave the plane left me. And she found herself at 15,000 feet in her chair, upside down, pinwheeling. And she fell, blacked out, fell, hit the canopy of the Amazon, which broke her fall. It's a miracle. Absolutely. She's the longest free fall without a parachute. And the canopy broke her fall. And she landed in the Amazon, woke up, had nothing but a broken collarbone that she knew of. She had one shoe, lost her glasses, and for the next 9 days followed the river and the lessons that she learned from her father and her own desire not to die, and was rescued. And she's a friend of mine now. She's now in her 50s, and she's an extraordinary woman. She spends half her year in Munich and the other half in the Amazon, just trying to save the rainforest. And we're going to go down to Bogota and the Amazon, and hopefully tell that story at the beginning of next year.
Wow. Chapter 2, Two Teachers by Bill Duke.
I grew up as a racist. I hated all white people because of slavery and segregation. I saw my father and mother go through. I just hated white. And I grew up an angry young black man, and I was tall and awkward, and I didn't talk much, and I wrote journals and stuff, and And these two people I'll never forget. Oh, it changed my life. Mrs. Jean Walker, English teacher, very stoic and like this, walking around the class. And she'd tell me 9 times not to write in my journal when she was teaching, and I just ignored her. This racist white woman. And one day, she says, "Duke, stay here after class." She said, "Give me that book." I said, "What?" "The journal, give it to me." I said, "I'm not giving you anything." She said, "If you don't give me the journal, I'll fail in the class and you can't pass." Threw the journal at her. Pissed off. Hated her. Come back to class the next several weeks before spring break and looked at her like, if I could punch you in your damn face, man. Spring break ends, come back to class. End of the first day, I'm going into class, she says, "Duke, come here." She gives me back my journal and this book. I said, "What is this?" She says, "The National Poetry Contest book." So what are you giving this to me for? She says, "Look on page 49. She put 2 of my poems in there and it won. I looked at her. This is somebody I hated. She had read my book, my journal, took the best poems out and submitted them to a national poetry contest, and I won the prize. I was speechless, and she knew I was speechless. She says, "There's nothing to say. You're good at what you do." That changed my mind. I wasn't quite sure how to think about race then because that never happened to me. And then I went to Dutch Community College. And, you know, James Hall was the dean. He was in the Navy and stuff. And I'd gotten a scholarship to Boston University after Dutchess. And I went to, but, you know, it was difficult. I got a scholarship for my classes, but I had to work for room and board and food and everything. And I was working 7 days a week, exhausted, and my grades weren't that great, and I just gone to the arts college. I decided I was going to come home to Poughkeepsie, and I was going to stay there for a year, quit BU, and get a job, make money, so I can save it for that at IBM. I went during the summer up to visit my friends at BU, and as I'm leaving, Dr. Hall see me. He says, "Hey, Duke, come here." I said, I got to go, Doctor. He says, "Duke, come here, come here." Oh, geez, this guy's a boring ass white man. I can't stand this. I go into his office just to be courteous. He says, "Have a seat." I said, "Okay." "How you doing, Duke?" "I'm okay." "You're going to Boston University, right?" "Yeah, well, I'm not. I'm going, but I'm quitting. I'm staying in Poughkeepsie for a year and going to go back next year." And he says, "No, you're not." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes into his vest pocket and hands an envelope to me. I said, "What is this?" He said, "Open it." In the envelope, it was a check of his own money that paid for 3 years of my room and board at Boston University. I looked in this white man's face. I'm supposed to hate. He doesn't say a word. We look at each other. I just said, "Thank you." He did not say a word. He put out his hand and he said, "Don't disappoint me." See, something happens to your racism after that. That's supposed to be your evil enemy that's responsible for the negative in your life and everything. The devil, the system, the creature. Just gave me a check to cover all of my expenses for 3 years. How do you hate that? Life-changing. So I evolved, you know, in my humanity to understand you cannot put a blanket on any of everything, of anything. It's all about the human being, the person, the individual, who they really are behind what their skin color is, behind what their words are, their position. It makes no difference. To know the human. If they respect you, you respect them. Simple. Arab, Chinese, Japanese, Jewish, white, black, green, Hispanic. Those topical services, that's a limited perception. you have the courage to engage people at their level of humanity, you're living. It's easier to dismiss you because I see you and I make assumptions. I learned a long time ago, ASSUME means it makes an ass out of you and an ass out of me, to assume. And I was taught by those two incidents. It was incredible. If it wasn't for those two people, I wouldn't probably be here today. And never asked for anything. All they said is to be your best. That's a reward. It's the truth.
Chapter 3, Thank God They Professionals by Rhomeyn Johnson.
I was living, I wasn't doing a show at the time, but I was living on the other side of town, and my dad was sick in the hospital, and my mother, and I actually had my car at that point, and my mother was at the hospital all day. She said, well, you know what, I just don't feel good, you know, being at the house by myself. Can you come over here and spend the night at the house? I said, oh, of course. I had my own apartment. I said, oh, yeah. So she said, well, look, I've been at the hospital all day. I don't have no food. I haven't cooked. Maybe you ought to stop at McDonald's or something and get you something. I said, oh, okay. And I stopped at the McDonald's. I went through the drive-thru. It was kind of late at night. And I ordered my food, and the girl said, well, can you pull over because, you know, we'll cook it and bring it out to you. I said, okay. So I'm sitting in the car, and it's cold, and I'm running my gas. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So I said, well, I'm going to go inside. So I came inside, and she looked. I said, I'm the guy you told to pull over. She said, oh, okay. So they said, we haven't even got it ready yet. So I'm standing at the counter, and there was like four guys at the counter, you know, getting our food. And the little boy in front of me, you know, the little McDonald's boy, he's like looking at me, and all of a sudden, he looks over like this, and he starts doing this. And I'm looking at him like, what the look you got? I'm looking at him like, what? He said, and I look over, the guy got a sawed-off shotgun pointed right at my head. And he's telling me, raise your hands, motherfucker. And my hands up. And these guys proceeded to rob the McDonald's. Oh, wow. And what he did was, it was two. One guy came in on the other side, the other door, the backup guy. And he uses me as a shield. Oh. And he got the gun under my arm, like my arm's up, he puts the gun under here, and he's got the gun right in the face of that little boy.
Oh, wow.
And he says, empty the register. And the little boy naturally, he said, empty the register. So the manager, a female at this time, she's down here, and the guy with the sawed off, he says, okay, empty all the registers. She empties all the registers except mine. And then he said, okay, open the safe. Mm. And she says, well, I can't, I don't have a combination, it's a drop box. She said, no, you can open the safe. She said, I can't open it. They come every night and get the money. The security come every night and get the money. I can't open it. He said, you lying. He says, get down on the ground, bitch. She gets down on the ground, on the floor of the place, and he leans over the counter, and he cocks the gun, and he puts it on the side of her head. He says, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to ask you one last time, open the safe. So she's like this, and she's like, she starts crying. Please don't kill me. I can't open the safe. I got a baby at home. Please, it's just me and my baby. Please, please. And I'm like this, and I'm just looking, and I'm just like, oh my God. And I got the guy behind me with the little boy like this, and I'm like this, and I'm like, oh, and I'm like this. And all of a sudden, the guy uncocks the gun. And the next thing on my mind is, thank God. They're professionals. Professionals don't want to shoot anybody. See, I found that out from being in Detroit around the hood. Professionals don't want to shoot anybody. They want to get in and get out. So he says, okay, we're finished getting the money. She jumps up, she gets the money, she gets down to my register, little boy, this McDonald's money. And we say, give him the money, give him the money. We yelling and screaming, and they say, shut up. We didn't shut up. Give him the money, give him the money. It was just pandemonium. So this manager, she knocks him out the way, goes in his register and get the money and put it in one of the big McDonald's bags and hand it to the guy. So The first guy out of the place is the guy that had the pistol under my arm. The last guy out, he says, anybody try anything, I'm gonna come back and kill everybody. He comes down the line of us. They didn't even rob us. He comes down the line of us and takes the gun across all our backs, the small of my back. I had this gun go down the small of my back, and I'm telling you, my life flashed before my eyes. When people say, oh, my life flashed, I went from being a baby shitting in my pants, in my diaper, all the way up to the, it was just like that. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, oh God, oh, like this. And he left out. When he left out, they took off running. I looked, they took off running. All of the customers jumped over the counter, and we was all behind the thing. By this time, the cops came in because they pushed the silent alarm. And I got to the house, and my mother said, oh, she said, you didn't get your food? I'm like, no, I didn't get it. So she says, what's wrong? I said, we got stuck up at McDonald's. My mother's like, oh, okay. My mother got mad at me when I said, I have to remember what that felt like, because one day I'm gonna have to act and have to recreate that experience. My mother got mad at me. That was the end of that story, but that's what happened. My mother said, what? You in that damn acting? And that's when I really finally realized this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Chapter 4, Prince's Principles by Alex Munoz.
I moved to Los Angeles before I got accepted to film school, and I just figured if I don't get into USC or UCLA or AFI, I'll, go assistant director or get a job at a production company or with a studio. So the second day I was in LA, I got an internship with a company called Propaganda Films. And on my second day of the job, a casting director says, hey, what's your name? And I said, Alex. She said, oh, her name is Lisa Fields. And she said, would you like to be a stand-in for a famous rock star? I'm like, well, who is it? And she said, well, I can't tell you. I said, nah, I don't want to be a stand-in because I want to be behind the camera. So I went back to my boss, Stephen Price, and I said, hey, Lisa Fields wants me to be a stand-in for a rock star. She won't tell me who it is, and I don't want to do it. And he said, why? I said, because I want to be a director. I don't want to be in front of the camera. I want to be behind the camera. He said, you have to do it. You've never been on a professional film set. So I raced back, and she was on the phone ready to hire somebody. I said, I'll do it. She said, okay. So the next day, I'm on the set, and the DP says, okay, Alex, you can leave now. And I turn around, and I'm face to face with Prince. And I'm like, I really wasn't a big Prince fan at the time, but I was looking down at him, and our noses were like this far apart. I'm like, wow, you got 4-inch heels on and I'm taller than you. And he just laughed and he goes, can we switch places? And I said, sure. So anyway, we were told not to talk to Prince. They said, do not talk to him, but he would talk to me. And on day 6, I got my letter of acceptance from USC. And my roommate got the letter, and she said, I have something really important to give you. I said, okay, well, I'm in downtown LA and I'm on this music video shoot. Can you bring it? So she gave me the letter. I opened it up and I went into the set, and I said, I was really excited. I said, I got into USC Film School. And everyone started clapping. And Prince said, I'm like, what? He goes, come here. I'm like, well, what did I do? So he said, so you're going to be a filmmaker? I said, yes. He said, let me hear you say that. I said, say what? He said, let me hear you say you're going to be a filmmaker. And I said, I am going to be a filmmaker. And he said, I want you to listen closely. There are 4 rules I want you to consider abiding by if you are going to pursue filmmaking in this town. I said, okay. So he said, first one, he pointed up, always remember God, the creator. Always remember God and your creator. Number 2, always remember where you come from. Because when you forget where you come from, you die as an artist. And then number 3 was break the rules. If you follow the rules, you're going to be boring and you're going to fade fast. And number 4 was always give back. You must give back as an artist. And I said, okay. And he said, repeat what I said, and I did. I call these my 4 purple cornerstones. Remember God, where you come from. Never forget where you come from. I'm sorry, let me start over. I will always remember the four, I call them my 4 purple cornerstones. Remember God and the Creator. Never forget where you come from. Break the rules, and always, always give back. And he said, grace is really important in your journey. So after he tested me on the 4, core principles, he told Rosie Gaines, his backup singer, he said, Rosie, pray for this brother that he does not go down the dark path. He needs to stay on the path of light. So Rosie Gaines took my hands, placed them on Prince's piano, and made a prayer of protection that I wouldn't be seduced by the dark side, all what Prince called the fleshly temptations. And she said, this is serious. We are praying for you. And after she prayed, Prince said, amen. Wow. And he said, don't forget what I told you. I said, I won't. So imagine that is a priceless encounter that cannot be measured. I just moved to LA. I finished my undergraduate work at Santa Barbara. For him to take the time to tell me these things and share with me his 4 core principles, and for him to ask his backup singer, Rosie Gaines, to pray for me, I never forget this. And one of the reasons why, when I decided to move forward with making FYI Films a nonprofit, I rummaged through my mind. I remember Prince saying, always give back. And he helped me. I don't think I'd be talking about FYI Films if Prince didn't tell me this about giving back. The second part of the story is, so when Prince died, right, they did a tribute concert for him. And I called the organizers and I said, hi, my name is Alex Munoz. Prince gave me some really good advice back in the day. I will do anything. I will sweep the streets. I will sell popcorn. I will sell hot dogs. I will be an usher. I'll do security. I just want to, in my own way, pay tribute to this great artist because he gave me some advice that I'll never, ever forget. So they said, we'll call you right back. And what happened was, 2 hours later, they called back and they said, we Googled you and you're a filmmaker. Why don't you do a film celebrating Prince? And I said, well, the concert's 10 days away. I can't possibly make a good enough film. And I said, how about if I document it? So I went to document this Prince tribute concert. And the very first interview I did happened to be in the same exact spot when Prince told me the 4 purple cornerstones. It was like, oh my God, this is where Prince told me to remember God, remember where you come from, break the rules, and always give back. And I felt really inspired. Like my body was like trembling because you could feel his presence in that area. It was the concert was right in front of LA City Hall, which is where they shot the video. How uncanny is that? Then I went out to the audience and interviewed some people about the concert, and Stevie Wonder does this amazing rendition of Purple Rain. So I'm trying to get backstage to interview Stevie, and I can't get to him. And the guards are saying, you can't talk to Stevie, he doesn't want to be bothered. So one of my FY Film alumni from Hawaii, Adrian Kelly, sees me and says, hey, Alex, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I think I told you when I taught FY Films, that when I taught the film workshop, that my first experience on a film set was being Princess Stanley. He said, yeah, but what are you doing here? I said, I'm doing a documentary. He said, well, why do you look mad? I said, because Stevie gave the best performance and I want to interview him and they won't let me get backstage. And he said, oh, I could help you. And I said, Adrian, that's really nice of you, but you can't help me. He said, Alex, I could help you. He goes in the back, comes back, and he says, come on. He takes me to Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder's nephew.
Oh, wow.
So I felt like it was full circle. So, I mean, I got like chicken skin right now because Prince tells me the importance of giving back. I'm there to do a documentary about this concert. I can't get to Stevie. Turns out one of my alumni never told me he was Stevie Wonder's nephew. Wow. Gets me backstage because I believe I had access to Stevie and all of Prince's backup singers and all of Prince's backup dancers. Because if I didn't teach that FYI film workshop in Hawaii, I would have met Adrian. And then 2 years later, I see Adrian at this concert and he gets me backstage. That's karma. That is, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I told Adrian, I said, why didn't you ever tell me you were Stevie Wonder's nephew? He said, I don't know, Munoz, I don't want people, my family, we don't want people to like us just because we're related to Stevie. So we just, but you earned it because you've come to our birthday parties and our 4th of July parties and you never asked any questions and you showed us love anyway. So, okay, now you know. So, I mean, what a blessing, right? That
Oh my gosh.
one
what
of
a
my
story.
alumni is Stevie Wonder's nephew, and little did I know that 2.5 years later, I would need him to complete my doc.
Right, and you're in the same spot where
Yeah.
you first met Prince. So
Yes.
it was a music video back
Yes.
in the day
Yes.
in front of LA City Hall?
Yeah.
Chapter 5, The Cat House by Jack Perez.
We had a feral cat. We've always had feral cats come to our house because we have lots of cats. And a feral cat, a wild cat, will just sense that cat people live there. And a feral cat obviously cannot be pet or touched or anything. They're wild animals. But we've done this over the years and we've fed feral cats. So, I guess it's a little bit over 10 years ago, we were moving from our apartment. And just as we were about to move, a feral cat showed up. And it was like, feed me. And we were like, yes, of course we'll feed you. But we're moving. And we were faced suddenly with this prospect of like, what are we going to do? This animal is like dependent upon us now, but we're moving. It got to the point where I was like literally driving across town every day to leave food. It's this empty house. The cat was standing there. It was the saddest thing. He's like, where's my food? I'm like, I'm driving across town. I can't keep this up. I can't expect the new tenants to take care of him or whatever. So I started looking into rescues and looking into that whole world. And it's again, I became educated. I was like, wow, there's just tons of kill shelters. If you bring an animal to a regular shelter, likely they will be killed. Certainly a feral who can never be adopted, rarely. What do you do with a feral cat? And so after a lot of research, I found this one place, which I'd never heard of, the Cat House on the Kings, which was this one woman's massive property up near Fresno that she had turned in this ranch-style multi-acre property into this sanctuary, an adoption center, where she had, almost 1,000 animals that were totally cared for. It wasn't a hoarder. It was like an operation.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And she was like, yeah, we actually have a feral, section. And if you can catch him, you can bring him here. Wow. And I was like, wow. And where everybody else was like, we're full up and they'll kill him and all. This was the one place. And when I went up there, it was like one woman and a couple of, maybe one other person and all of these animals. And I was like, this was like the definition to me of like a saint. Like this was like this woman who had dedicated her whole life to these animals, literally, and was like making it work. She definitely needed help. But I said to myself, my God, well, what can I do in exchange for this? You saved this cat's life and these thousands of other dogs and cats. So I decided to make this YouTube video. I said, I'll come back and I'll do a portrait of you and the place, a couple of minutes, and we'll put it on YouTube. And this is when YouTube was sort of new, and we just, as luck would have it, there were enough cat people out there that it started to go viral. And people really saw that this was this beautiful soul that was doing something so unique. And she started to get donations and it started to get more well known. And now, 10, 13 years later, it's considered, it's a very well known institution, around the world. People come from all over the world to visit this place and support it. My wife has said, it's the most important film you ever made, was that film for the Cat House, because talking about direct action, that film, because it went viral, because I made it, because it exists, and it reached people, that institution, that sanctuary received much needed donations that saved a lot more animals. And so in terms of doing something that's valuable, truly valuable, that little film, when I think about it, is definitely up there as being an important movie of mine, just because it ultimately helped a lot of animals.
Chapter 6, Station Fire by Andy Rydzewski. Do you still have the mini DV tapes?
No,
Collecting dust somewhere?
Unfortunately, it's a bummer. This would have been 11 years ago, my house that was renting burned down in one of the LA, at the time,
the biggest fire in LA, and I lost all of my films, I lost all my writing, all my art. I used to, draw, and it still kind of stings, but truthfully, it was a big reset button. It has helped me with attachment and having a lack of it. It was the year after my house burned down. I just kind of lived on the road for a year. I could fit everything I owned in a backpack, and so I slept on couches. I flew out to Hawaii and slept on my buddy's hotel room while we were working on a movie out there. My life was a bit of an adventure, which I think was good. I think it was an interesting life for a time, but at the sacrifice of losing, basically everything I had created up until 30 years old, essentially.
Was this the station fire?
Yeah, the station fire. Yeah.
I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a strange time. It's funny to think that that's so long ago, because it does feel so relevant to my life. Like, it really, it's altered some of my way of approaching things, and purchases feel strange to me still. Furniture and owning things still feels a little weird, a little PTSD, I think. But my life has been good since then. So I just one of the stepping stones, I guess. Who knows?
Aside from you losing all these things and that being the horrible, negative side, and losing, in a sense, your parts of yourself really went down in that fire.
Yeah.
Do you think it showed you how temporary things are, and you looked at things in a new light, in a positive way that way?
Yeah, I would for sure say the silver lining of losing everything is that the idea of impermanence becomes a lot easier to grasp. And I for sure, it's the impermanence of everything, life, health, friendships, you just never, I think I take some of those things less for granted now, perhaps, I hope, I don't know. And I do wonder, 20 years from now, what will the scars of that look like? Will they still be there? Will I don't know. I moved into a house a year ago after living in someone else's house for basically 10 years. I had a wing of a house to myself. And when I moved into my place last year, I owned nothing. I had no bed. I didn't have a chair, a desk. I had nothing. And so 10 years, I guess, at the time after the fire was the first time that I was like, okay, I got to purchase some things. And it still feels odd. I can feel the weight of those things. I liked the idea that any particular morning, not to say I would do this necessarily, but that I could just kind of pack up everything into my car and be on my way, and that's everything. It's all I need. So, yeah, I don't know. So it's strange. I think I'm still processing all of it, in terms of its ultimate lessons.
No, things do own you. It's true, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have a weight for sure. Yeah.
Chapter 7, Last Moments by Adisa.
10 years ago, I went to Sierra Leone with Isaiah Washington on a documentary film shoot. And on that shoot literally would change my life. Not only did I get exposed to Sierra Leone and the conditions over there, because they had just undergone a civil war, and Isaiah was looking up his roots, and I was part of the documentary team. I had a great experience. But when I came back, I had a near-death experience because I had caught a virus over there called the hantavirus. And when I got back to LA, I was just fatally ill, and I had to be rushed to the hospital. I was in the ICU, and my heart stopped beating 3 times. I had multiple organ failure, and I was in really bad shape. And the doctors didn't think I was going to make it. Nobody thought I was going to make it. So my mother at that time flew up here, and people were just praying. I was just in critical condition, and but miraculously, I made it through. Yeah, I made it through.
Did they know what it was?
They didn't at the time. They didn't, and it was a good thing that I was at what they called I was at Daniel Freeman Memorial Hospital, and they were like, "Oh, thank God you didn't go to like Cedars-Sinai," because the Daniel Freeman Hospital, they could bring in other technicians from everywhere. Like they could bring in people from UCLA, they could bring in doctors from USC to help on my case, right? Whereas I've been at Cedars, they have like clear rules about Cedars-Sinai doctors working there, and you can't bring others in. But because I was at Daniel Freeman Hospital, they were able to bring in other doctors. So nobody knew what I had. All I knew was I had multiple organ failure, and my body was shutting down. And this one particular doctor stayed with me, and he had to restart my heart 3 times in the middle of the night. And so, yeah, no, it looked like I was on my deathbed. It looked like I was on my deathbed. And actually, I thought I was on my deathbed too. The only thing kept me going was the fact that, because at one point, I remember myself making sort of this resolve that, like, you know what, if I'm gonna die, my last moments were in Africa. My last moments were playing with children. My last moments were with, like, you know, having fun and sharing of my gifts with everybody, because that's what I was doing in Africa, giving out soccer balls, and I had made some nice relationships over there. So I said, you know what, if I gotta go, then so be it. I had made peace with it, you know, and but it was another plan for me. It was another plan. I'm here.
And how long were you in the hospital?
I was there for about. I was probably there for about 7 to 8 weeks total, but for like 3 weeks I was sedated, and I was under heavy sedation as the doctors treated me and put me on dialysis, and were just, you know, trying everything to fix me, trying everything to make me better, but nothing worked, and they didn't know. So they said they just had to let it run its course and just let me be, you know, just let me be, and sort of let my body fight it. When I got back and I had gotten well, I shocked everybody because I told my mother I wanted to go back to Africa. And she was like, "Oh no, you can't go back to Africa. Oh no, you're not gonna do that to me again." My mother was beside herself. My father, everybody tripped out. I mean, they were like, "No, you can't go back." Because I got an opportunity to go back with, was it Regina King? Yeah, Regina King, the actress, had invited me to go back and work with her on her documentary. And so they were like, "No, you can't go back. You can't go back," especially if you're going back to Sierra Leone, the same place. And so people were freaking out, like freaking out. And but I was resolved. I was like, you know what? I'm better. I can do this. And I wanted to do this. I wanted to be. There was some things that had happened to me by being sick. You know, like I was having revelations around my life and what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to show up. And so yeah, and going back to Africa was part of it. I think the light had turned on more. I'm not gonna say it was completely different. I mean, I was already like a very positive, optimistic person, wanting to do things, but I was probably stopping myself, like the tournament in Africa and working with the kids. I never thought I could do that. You know, like there was something about the way I was living life that I felt like that was larger than what I could do, right? And so I started to, so yes, to answer your question, once I got better, I started to test the boundaries more, like around greatness and largeness and saying that I can do it. I can do that. Why not? Right? And so, yeah, in that way. And then having to experience death also, I mean, it just gives you this sense of, I'm not saying immortality, but to experience and be that close to death and to know that it can be snapped away from you at an instant, it kind of sharpened my focus about living life in the present, moment to moment, and doing as much as I can in that moment.
Chapter 8, Amy Purdy's Journey by Barbara Seymour Giordano.
Essentially, Amy's story is that at 19, she contracted meningitis. And she died, essentially, and then was brought back. But she'd gone to the hospital. She was so advanced in it that the body tries to save the organs and the blood rushes from it. So rushes from the vital organs, and your hands turn purple, her feet turn purple, her cheeks and nose. And when that happens, it's like frostbite. And so when they got her to the hospital, it was touch and go. She actually did pass away very briefly, and they brought her back. But it was touch and go for a long, long time. And then in the end, they had to amputate her legs from the ankles down, or the calves down, and both of them. But everything else was saved. I mean, she did have a lot of she lost hearing in her ear. She had all of these issues. So here she was, this story, and she'd done a lot already at this point. You know, she had been in a Madonna video and she'd done all these things, but I had to, because she'd done so many things, I had to weigh and measure what was important in the story. And that's where I had to trust my intuition and where I could actually look at this guide of the hero's journey, because her life story, this particular incident, fit perfectly in it. So it isn't a life story. It's not an autobiography. It's a moment in time. And a great speech is. It doesn't try to cover too much. It's a very narrow subject. And this narrow subject for Amy was her life, this life where she had to let go of the old Amy to embrace the new Amy. And we wrote that in there. And every time she goes, every time I say that line, I cry. And I was like, good, yay. But that was the middle part of the hero's journey, the very point where she then begins to embrace the journey that she's on. So even though you go over the threshold, right, you go through the steps of, and I can't remember all of them, but there's that low point in the circle, right? And that's where she began to rise like a phoenix from the ashes. And she began to bring back what she learned, of course, to cross it back over and bring the elixir back to the world, which was a speech. So it was really about her experience and what she learned and the struggles that she went through and how hard it was, but yet how she wouldn't change a thing, right? And so I had to figure out, do we keep the Madonna video part in there? Because my speakers use slides, right? The majority, I think I've only worked with a couple who have not. In high resolution photos, I don't, occasionally I let them use text if it's important to the story. But the images are wallpaper that really helps the emotion stick. So the story will be stickier if the resolutions and the photos of the resolution of the photos are super emotional, the photos themselves. And she had a lot of emotional photos. And so we chose the most important parts of the story. So we had to take them, the audience low, to the lowest point to bring them back up again in the journey where she was resurrected.
So she does the TED Talk, and then what's the response within what amount of time?
So this is so exciting because it's a TEDx talk, right? So this is 2011, and she's like, okay, I did the talk. It's been posted. It took like a month before they posted it. Great. And this was probably, so we did it in May. It probably went up in June. Crickets. Giddy, giddy, giddy. She got about 20,000 hits and through December. And then I think it was in December, all of a sudden she calls me like completely worked up. Oh my God, Barbara, what? She goes, go look at the TED Talk. They had taken the TEDx talk and put it on the TED page.
Oh.
And they don't do that anymore, but they did it for her. And so that's where you can see it, is on the TED page. They put it on the TED page, and once that happened, it went viral. Wow. And she's like, people are writing in Arabic. Like a month later, it just started going everywhere. And we were watching it tick through, like, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 by the hour. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And yeah, so she just captured the hearts and minds of so many people, her story. And it's a remarkable story. And she's a remarkable woman. Just a really beautiful on the outside, but equally as beautiful on the inside.
Chapter 9, Instinct by Walid Azami.
I work with Madonna, and I worked on her world tour, and I befriended a friend of mine, now a really good friend, Jamie King, who's her creative director of the tour, and like so many other artists. And so just glaze over that real fast. So he would watch me come in and look at everything, like everything. I would like inspect like crazy, because I knew where I was. I knew that I'm gonna learn so much from this woman. And I left that job, and out of the blue, he just texted me one day. He's like, hey, Walid, how are you? Let's go get dinner. I wanna know what you're up to. And so I went to dinner with him, and I drove up from Anaheim Anaheim or Fullerton, one of those two cities in Orange County at the time. And I drove up to LA, and I met him for dinner. But what he did not know is that I was dead broke. broke, okay? And this is pretty much right at the birth of the 2008 Great Recession. So I had quit being a music video director's assistant. I had done some PA jobs. I was the worst PA you could ever hire on. I mean, the amount of effort I put into not looking busy, it was exhausting. And I thought, just do the work, you know, but like trying to walk back and forth and like look busy without really doing the stuff. So Jamie had called me. He's like, I want to know what you're up to. And he had a plan. So we went up and had dinner. And another friend, Dago, who's a very talented director, joined us also. And he asked me, what are you doing? Now, I'm broke at this time. I have a credit card and I probably have like $300-400 in my savings, and that was it, because you don't get paid much as an assistant in Hollywood, you know? And so, and I had quit that to try to do some behind the scenes video, like MTV's making the video. And I got 1 or 2 jobs and then it just stopped. But I didn't know that the recession was born, you know? And so I had stopped for everyone, but people hadn't been honest about it yet, that something happened overnight, right? And so I went to dinner with them, and they were asking me like, so what are you doing? And I would say, well, I want to, and he's like, shut up. And I thought, what? And I said, and I was so confused because I thought, hey, you're asking me what I'm doing or what I want to do, and I'm telling you, and you're telling me to shut up. And we did this a few times back and forth, and he said, don't talk again until you're actually doing it. Because trying is lying. And I don't know if he actually said trying is lying or if I picked that up somewhere else, but the meaning is the same. Trying is lying. So you're doing it or you're lying to yourself, but you're not lying to me, right? And he was really rough with me. So he broke me that night and he rebuilt me that night. And he gave me one of the best lessons I've ever learned in my life. I actually practiced it without really knowing what it was. And he gave me this thing I'm going to tell you right now. And he said, no matter what country you're from, no matter what faith you practice or you don't practice, gender, national, anything, doesn't matter what socioeconomic level, one of the first things that any human being learns, one of the first words is no. Because we are told no so many times. And he said it's not the hearing no that's bad. It's why we're telling people no. No, I don't want people to think you're a bad baby. I don't want people to think that I'm a bad mother. I don't want, be a good little girl and be quiet, right? Be a good boy. Don't show your emotions. Be tough. And so we are the only living creatures on this planet that teach our children to kill their instincts. And so we're sending people out there to conform, and you have to a certain extent, not to be a freak in society, right? But we're sending people out there and we're taking away their greatest tool, that fight or flight, And so he said, if your instincts tell you to do something, go do it. I don't care if you think you're gonna look like a fool. If your instincts tell you, don't get in this car right now, don't get in that car. Let everyone think you're crazy. But that is a direct phone call from you to God or Allah or energy or the universe or whatever you want to think is bigger than you, okay? A greater power. And he said, that's a direct phone call that you're getting at any moment. So he gave me examples. He said, how many times have you thought about somebody and then they text you? And you're like, that's so weird. I was thinking about you. It's like, that's a connection. How many times has a mother been at work and she's like, something is wrong. Something is wrong with my baby. And they call the babysitter and like, yeah, there was a small accident. He or she is fine. That mother knows there's a connection, right? And so he said, the closest you'll ever be to God, or again, whatever, I don't want people getting lost on that part of it, or whatever higher power, Mother Nature, is when you listen to your instincts. And he's like, if you want to photograph everybody in all green paint, go do it. Something is telling you this is going to be good for your career. Now, that night, so that's what I mean by he broke me and then he rebuilt me. And he was setting in an infrastructure that I had already been using and how I've acted in a lot in my earlier career, in my school and everything. Sorry. That's okay. And so he had set like the structure, the infrastructure of like things that a guideline. And I had been doing it, but I didn't know this was my instincts, okay? And I went home. Thank God he paid for dinner because I did not have money to even pay for my portions. And we had like drinks and dessert and appetizers. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, this is expensive. And he set me on my way. And for like a week after, I had this weird feeling, apparently it was my instincts, but this weird foreign feeling that I should buy a camera. But I didn't, when I tell you, I did not even know that a camera, you can detach a lens from a camera. Like a DSLR, or I guess mirrorless now, whatever. I did not even know you could do that. I didn't know what an ISO was. I knew nothing about a camera. And so, but I had this feeling, go buy a camera. Jobs are not coming in. Rent is coming up. And I only have a few $100 on a credit card left. And I sat on it and I pushed it down. And it just kept persisting for, I want to say a week and a half or something like that. This feeling was there and it would not go away. And I don't know what made me, but I decided to listen to my instincts. And I went into a camera shop and I'm so naive, but I went in and I said, hi, hi, I have $2,000 on my credit card. And I said, I have $2,000 and I want to be a photographer. And he sold me like $1,998 and whatever. There was nothing else left in the store to buy, not even AA batteries, because it was like, they maxed out my card. And I bought a 40D, which is not even a real, it was like a prosumer camera. And it was a good camera, but I'm just saying it wasn't like, it was whatever. It was like a Rebel today or something. And I sat in my car and I remember the most nauseous feeling. And I thought, what did I do? Now I can't even get a cash advance on my last credit card because I maxed that sucker out. I went home and I was a mess. And what a dramatic person, but I was a mess, you know, and I thought, man, I don't even know how to turn this thing on. Like, no joke, I have no idea how to turn this thing. I didn't know a single thing, okay? But I started shooting things like leaves on a tree and a trail of ants, and it was all horrible pictures. I got a call because I wanted to do behind the scenes video. And I got a call because of a friend of a friend of a friend. And they were like, hi, is Walid there? I'm like, right? And I was like, yes.
What are you selling
Stranger,
me?
exactly. And they said, hey, somebody said you have a video camera. And at the time, it was like the mini DV tapes. So they were like, hey, I heard you have an HD camera. And because everyone was using the Panasonic DVX100, which was like not fully HD, I think, whatever. But I said yes, and I was so excited because I can buy food now, okay? And put food in the fridge. And they said, Usher needs somebody to come to the Kodak Theater right now. And I'm packing everything in a bag, throwing everything. Didn't even have camera bags, like I put them in a gym bag and stuff. And I'm about to close the door. And that weird feeling in my gut said, Usher doesn't know why you're hired. It's his manager. Go get that stupid camera you just bought too, the still camera. And I grabbed it and I ran in the car. And I remember I had a little BlackBerry Curve with the ball. And I wrote, f-stop means this. ISO means this. And, aperture means this, whatever. And that was pretty much our shutter speed. And I went there, I went underground like 2-3 levels. I said hi to Usher. And I'm one of those people that when I'm nervous, I look like I'm hiding a bomb. I'm telling you, it's like this. It just looks so bad, And I don't have a poker face whatsoever. And I was just shooting stuff and I decided to put the video camera on a tripod in the corner. So now it looks like a security camera. But Usher has the footage, and I wish I had it, but of me trying to figure this out and looking at my BlackBerry, I'm like, okay, this button did this, and I'll take pictures. And I didn't even know that I had a 1 gigabyte card, CF card, So my compact flash was one, and I was shooting on JPEG small. Did not even know about these settings, that they existed, or that RAW was such a thing, okay? And I'm shooting machine gun style because I'm banking on quantity here, not quality. And pictures are like, because they had the neon tubes, pictures are coming out like all different colors, but it is not the color you want to see. And Usher's coming out blurry because I'm apparently on like not even at 40. I think it was I pretty much almost had the bold button, you know, it was just dragging the shutter. Everything was blurry. And I'm ramping up the ISO as high as possible. I'm just hitting any button, okay? And Usher looks at me and says, "What f-stop are you using?" And when I tell you I have mastered how to die on the inside and keep a calm face, I think I'm keeping a calm face. That gut feeling said, walk away. I was on autopilot. I don't think that was Walid that day, okay? I was on autopilot. That gut feeling said, walk away. And I remember it was instant, and it said, it's better that he thinks you're a crazy artist than someone who has no idea, which was the truth, okay? And actually, now I think both are true. But I went upstairs. I looked up again because I wrote f-stop, but I had to look up. I'm like, what did this mean? You know, with all these performers, street performers, and I'm like, come on, Verizon, you know, like give me the reception and everything. And I went back down in case he asked me, and I wrote it down because I'd be like, f-stop is this. I'm like, I am using 5.6, you know, but he didn't ask me again, and I just kept shooting. I went home and sewed down, and I looked at all the pictures, and I did not even know that Photoshop exists. I did not know Photoshop was a thing. The whole institute of Adobe was not even in my spectrum whatsoever, okay? So I decided to download all the pictures, open them up individually inside the preview, like what you would open up a PDF in. And so you have the option of bringing down contrast, exposure, saturation, hue, and that's about it. And I'm looking at these pictures, I'm like, I don't know where Usher is because everything is blurry. I can't tell, you know, anything. And out of that, I probably pulled under 10 images that you can identify it was Usher and that he was actually in focus on accident, okay? And I pulled up about 10 of them. And this is me opening a picture one at a time. I'm like, no, next. It was a disaster, okay? And then it was like, I did not even know such a thing of Lightroom existed. So I would take them in one folder, copy them, paste them into a second folder as I'm eliminating which pictures I want, you know, and narrowing down. And I found about 10, 12, maybe 9, I don't know. But I opened them up in that preview panel, and I thought, oh my God, they're every color under the rainbow. And I remember again that instinct was really in play, and it was like, just turn it all black and white. And I desaturated all of them, and I boosted the contrast a little bit. They were already blurry sometimes, and they were already high ISO, so super grainy. And I sent them to Benny Medina, who was Usher's manager at the time. Now he does J-Lo and I think J-Lo only. And they called me within like 30 minutes. And they said, Walid, I don't know how you guessed it, but we sent the pictures to Usher. And his whole new thing for the new album is old Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
And he wants these black and white, grainy, imperfect images. And so we want to know, would you be willing to work with him and be his personal photographer?
Oh my gosh.
And that to me is like, that's the perfect story in my career of following your instincts and just having faith in it. I mean, I know that people are listening to this and they're like, he's crazy. Like, how am I going to take that chance? But that was me just following instincts from the start and going, there's this weird feeling and I don't know what's going on. I'm going to follow it. And every single day, I would learn one new thing on YouTube, and I would type things like, what does exposure mean? And I would study it, because I'm a history major, you know? Ask me about the Civil War, I'll tell you everything about it, you know? And I would learn that one thing. And then I was not allowed to go to bed until I learned one new thing every single day. So after a week, it was no big deal. After a month, it was no big deal. By the end of the second month, it started adding up, the things that I knew, you know? And so Usher would say, hey, let's shoot over there. I'm like, no, let's not, because I hadn't even reached that yet. I was just on natural window light, you know? And I was like, no, that's not, let's just stand over here and do it. And I would just, so whatever I learned the night before, I would practice it on him the next day. And he's like, you have such a vast style. Like, you do so many things. I'm like, dude, you don't even know. Like, I'm on YouTube every night, like learning things and then coming downstairs and practicing it on you. And I learned how to photograph on tour with Usher.